Canadian businesses are shutting their doors at a rate the country hasn't seen since the start of the pandemic. The number of active Canadian businesses in June fell significantly, which was the biggest monthly decrease since May 2020. According to Statistics Canada, 5% of all businesses in the country shut their doors in the month. In the first 3 months of this year, Canadian business insolvencies in a quarter reached their highest point since the start of the global financial crisis in 2008. I'm now joined by Brendan Caldwell, director at Caldwell Securities Limited, to discuss the business closure surge in Canada. Brendan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Theresa. That's a shocking number, 5% in a single month. Wow.
Well, on that topic, as I mentioned, approximately 5% of businesses closed in June. Why are businesses struggling?
Well, I think there's a few factors that gone into it. I mean, the one is the CERB payment or the business assistance payment. Not all businesses were able to repay the money that they were loaned by the government this past March. And if you weren't able to repay that, the effective interest rate on it becomes extortionate, because I think if you borrowed maybe $60,000, you only had to repay $40,000 if you repaid by the end of March. And if you couldn't actually repay that, I mean, you had to repay the whole amount of money. So it would seem that any business that wasn't able to repay really wasn't solvent, because every other interest rate that you could possibly borrow on, including credit cards, is not that extortionate. So it was a help for the businesses for a while, but I think the government repayment ended up to be a bit of a poison chalice for some.
And is it possible that this is the first sign of a trend in Canadian businesses? And is there a lack of ambition in Canada?
Well, that's a double-barrel question. No, I don't think there's any lack of ambition in Canada. Keep in mind that we are largely made up of people who came, or whose parents came from somewhere else in the world to try and make a better life in the new one. So, I mean, that takes a certain amount of ambition, or cultural propensity for ambition, just that alone. And to live in the most frozen bit of the British Empire, it also takes a little bit of ambition and a few layers to wrap around oneself. So I think we're ambitious enough. It is, I think, a challenge for a bunch of reasons. I mentioned the sort of latent holdover from the COVID pandemic. Maybe one, I think higher interest rates and higher inflation has been another challenge, and the wage demands that go along with that. It's been hard for, say, restaurants to keep customers when the price of food has gone stratospheric. If it's true in grocery stores, it's even more so in restaurants. I bet they make up a fairly sizable proportion of that 5% of Canadian businesses. But then I think governments, if I may, would be best to get out of the way. Less help, less regulation, less taxes and reporting and everything. It's the burden to be a business in Canada is significant. So I think there is considerable ambition. I do think that we could, as a nation and as a province, make it easier for businesses to operate.
Now, you did mention less taxes and things like that, but what else can Canada do to better support its businesses and entrepreneurs?
Well, again, keeping something consistent tax regime, a consistent regulatory regime. Taxes do not need to beget more taxes. As the philosopher once said, the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy. So we don't actually need more regulation in most industries, including my own. But in general, from restaurants to financial services, from banking to natural resources, the hurdles to actually getting a business going and keeping one going are higher here than in many other jurisdictions. And we really are in a global market in almost every field. So we're not competing against ourselves, we're competing against the world.
And we do just have under a minute left, but what advice would you give to struggling businesses?
Keep talking to your creditors. There is a temptation when business is not going well to want to hide, to want to try and fix it all yourself, to not communicate. We invest in private equity and in private debt to a certain extent, and we have much better outcomes with our investee companies that continue to communicate with us. Bankers, other lenders are the same. If you're talking to them, if you're working at a repayment plan, you're going to have a much better result and a much better outcome for the business, most likely, than if you go and hide and try and fix it all yourself. So just keep talking to the people that are your financial partners, and that'll help you more than any single thing.
Brendan, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well.